Tell me if you've heard this story before. A young man seeking wisdom and knowledge moves to a new city, starts attending a new school. He's going to seek knowledge. He's going to be dedicated to his studies. He's going to wait. Who's that beautiful girl? The young man notices that a beautiful girl also lives in the town. And soon he's studying more how to win her hand than how to become a wise and virtuous student. And yet, all is not easy for our hero, for there are other gentlemen who are seeking the hand of this eligible young lady. Her father in particular does not want her to marry a mere student. He wants her to marry someone with money, someone with means, someone who, of course, could not understand her heart as our young, dashing, and virtuous hero can. Does this story sound familiar? Well, if you like Shakespeare, it sounds a lot like the plot of at least two plays. First of all, Two Gentlemen of Verona, which isn't as well known as the second play, Taming of the Shrew. Now, Taming of the Shrew involves, in particular, a father who is very much wanting to guard his younger daughter from being wooed by the wrong man, but has the problem of an older daughter who is, well, the shrew. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, in the early 1840s, decided to take the shape of this plot and turn it to his own devices. He gets rid of the older sister, the shrew, and decides there's going to be one lady whose affections are sought by multiple men. Primarily, they will be sought by a hero, the Spanish student. And so he calls his play The Spanish Student after Victorian, who is his main character. Now, Victorian he's an okay guy. He's pretty virtuous. He's pretty upstanding. He's a little dim. He seems to think that romantic love is the highest thing one can achieve. And he mostly is seeking a love relationship that will help his heart grow in affection more and more and more. He's not terribly studious, not terribly intellectual. He's not terribly interested in his mind being expanded. And yet, Longfellow chooses for a heroine in The Spanish Student a woman who isn't merely a woman of affection. She isn't merely a woman of a great heart. She's a woman of a great mind and a woman who is a great artist. This woman's name is Preciosa. And Preciosa becomes Longfellow's first major heroine of his writing career that's filled with so many amazing heroines. Well, I'm Dr. Timothy Bartell, and today we're going to continue our discussion of Longfellow's heroines, starting with his first major heroine from an admittedly imperfect play, The Spanish Student. So let's dig into the characters of The Spanish Student. The Spanish Student was written, as I said before, in the early 1840s. It's published in 1842. And it's set in Spain, and the main characters are Victorian, the Spanish student, and Preciosa, who isn't Spanish. In fact, she's part of the Romani people, who travel around and are often involved in Spanish plays in artistic pursuits and cultural practices that are a little at odds with Spanish culture, and especially the Catholic Church. One of the main subplots of The Spanish Student, in fact, doesn't concern Victorian and Preciosa in a will-they, won't-they relationship, but involves Preciosa being potentially censored by the Catholic Church. Now, Preciosa is a dancer, and there are conversations between some Spanish noblemen at the beginning of the play about how she must be an unvirtuous woman given that she dances on stage. In fact, the Pope dispatches a cardinal and an archbishop to come watch the dancing in Spain to make sure that it's not something that needs to be censored. In fact, you get the sense that the cardinal and archbishop are going to shut down all artistic expression, especially artistic expression of the Romani people, who are seen as culturally suspect. And we have this scene where Preciosa needs to dance before the cardinal and archbishop. And we can kind of anticipate how the scene's going to go. She's going to dance, it's going to be wonderful, but these prejudiced and puritanical men will not see and will shut it down and they'll persecute her. But an interesting thing happens. I'm going to read you the stage directions from this scene in the play. The archbishop and cardinal look on with gravity and an occasional frown, but as the dance continues, both become more and more pleased and excited, and at the length rise from their seats, throw their caps in the air, and applaud vehemently as the scene closes. Something has happened. Preciosa, through her dancing, has won over these seemingly dour delegates of the Pope, And they celebrate and not only allow her to keep dancing, but praise her dancing as both beautiful and virtuous. Now, there's a question in the Spanish student of whether Preciosa can retain her virtue and still be a dancer, but also whether she can retain her virtue and still be a lover. Because one of the rivals of Victorian is a nobleman named the Count of Lara. Now, the Count of Lara, we find from the opening scene, is a rascal. He's a scoundrel. He does not want to have a upstanding Christian marriage with Preciosa. He wants her to become his lover and then to kind of cast her away when he gets tired of her. And there's a very pivotal scene in the play just after Preciosa has had this victory on the stage where the church has approved and applauded her artistic expression and her career, where the Count of Lara basically finds an audience, a private audience with Preciosa, and presses his suit of love, and basically says, "I'd like you to become my paramour." And Preciosa has an interesting response to him. Her response isn't, "No, get away from me, gross man," calling for the cops, having them haul him away, which we maybe would want her to do. She responds to him by saying, "Oh, I love you." And I want to read you what she says because her explanation of her love is very interesting. She says this, "Nay, come no nearer. The words I utter are its sign and token. Misunderstand me not. Be not deceived. The love wherewith I love you is not such as you would offer me. For you come here to take from me the only thing I have, my honor. You are wealthy. You have friends and kindred, and 1,000 pleasant hopes that fill your heart with happiness. But I, as poor and friendless, having but one treasure, and you would take from that from me? And for what? To flatter your own vanity, and make me what you most despise. Oh, sir, such love that seeks to harm me cannot be true love. Indeed it cannot. But my love for you is of a different kind, but seeks your good. It is a holier feeling. It rebukes your earthly passion, your unchaste desires, and bids you look into your heart and see how you do wrong that better nature in you and grieve your soul with sin." So Preciosa plays a dangerous game here. She says, "Oh, I love you. I love you more than you love me. I love you so much, I'm going to ask you to respect my virtue and my honor, and to respect your virtue and your honor." Now, perhaps a lesser playwright, a less in tune with human nature playwright, might have her just say, "Oh, sir, you're so privileged, you're so noble, surely you'll get away with this. And yet I have nothing, I'm culturally marginalized, and all I have is my honor. So don't take that away from me, just pity me." And it would end there. And that would be a conventional scene in a play such as this. But Longfellow has the heroine who's not just a scared, pitiful creature. He has her turn it around on the Count and say, yes, I have my virtue, and you have your nobility, your connections that I don't have. And so please don't take that from me. But that's not the end of her argument. The end of her argument is, look, sir, I in fact love you so much, I care about your soul. And you won't just hurt me, you're going to hurt yourself. Look out for yourself, and thus do not do this thing that you are intending to do. Preciosa seems to see into the heart of men. I like the term perspicacity for this, and I think it's a term that's going to come up a lot as we examine Longfellow's writing, that his heroines have a perspicacity. They see through the men who are trying to win their hand or trying to censor them or are suspicious of their behavior or their culture. Preciosa is perspicacious and is able to get through to the Count of Lara and say, look, your soul is in danger, and that's why you shouldn't do this. Yes, my honor's in danger, but even more that, look out for yourself. Now, unfortunately, Victorian, our young, impressionable Spanish student, is listening at the door while this conversation takes place. And he doesn't hear the whole thing. He just overhears Preciosa telling the Count of Lara that she loves him. And Victorian is, of course, distraught and runs away and thinks that the love of his life has given her heart to another man, a pretty vicious and vile man at that. Of course, by the end of the play, all of this is worked out. The Count of Lara is held to account for his evil actions, and there's this weird thing that happens that I think diminishes the play a little bit towards the end, where a letter is received by Preciosa just before the climax of the play that says, "You're not Romani at all. A Romani man stole you away from a Spanish lord. You're actually a Spanish aristocrat and never knew it." And so there's this kind of moving her from the Romani people into the Spanish aristocracy at the very end, which I think takes away a little bit from the import of having a heroine who's Romani in a culture that's pretty opposed to the Romani people. So I don't think it's a perfect play. It's the first play Longfellow wrote. As we talked about last time, Longfellow was pretty new to writing original poetry. He had only been publishing poetry for the last 3 or 4 years when this comes out in 1842. But regardless of its imperfection, it becomes an important contribution to American theater and American literature. There's a letter a letter exchange that Longfellow has with a friend, where his friend says, "Your Spanish student I've read with joy, and yet I hear that many mothers in the Massachusetts communities have forbid their daughters from going to see it, lest they be corrupted." Now it's interesting because Longfellow was, as we've mentioned before, a man who was very morally sensitive, always sought to be very morally upright, even in his failings, and worried very much about whether he was encouraging the right things in his audience. And yet he boldly says, "My heroine can be a great dancer, can be on stage, and yet still live a life of Christian virtue. She can coordinate her work, her aesthetic calling, with her moral calling, and those aren't going to be at odds with each other." And especially in the scene where the cardinal and archbishop celebrate her artistic expression. This isn't the cardinal and archbishop saying, "Oh, morality doesn't matter, we just care about art." It's a vindication of art in morality's eyes. And I think that Longfellow is working toward an ability to vindicate morality in an aesthetic viewpoint as well. Can you be a great artist and be a great seeker of virtue? The Romantic era questioned this. We have many Romantic poets who think that transgression morally equals a sort of aesthetic genius. And yet Longfellow is trying for a more difficult thing. Can we marry the aesthetic and the ethical? And can we see them as coinciding with each other and harmonizing with each other? And can we do it with heroines and thus create models for our readers that are surprising and inspiring? We begin to see this take shape with Preciosa, and we're going to see it take even more shape with Evangeline next time. So thanks for listening. I have a whole chapter on the Spanish student in The Heroines of Henry Longfellow, my new book. If you're interested, check it out. Thanks for hanging out with us and exploring one of the lesser-known works of Longfellow, which still has a lot to teach us and much interest for us today. I've been Dr. Timothy Bartell. Thank you.